Dawn does not arrive with trumpets. It comes quietly, almost apologetically, as if aware is intruding on men who have not truly slept. The light seeps through mist and damp wool, through the low breath of bodies pressed close together for warmth. Cloaks are stiff with yesterday's rain. Mail lies half unbuckled, cold against skin. Boots remain on feet swollen for miles, laces crusted with mud. The earth beneath them is not ground so much as a presence, dark, patient, smelling of rot and frost. Somewhere beyond the tree-lean, a bell sounds from a chapel whose stones were laid long before these men were born. The bell trembles once, cracked and uneven, then falls silent, as though uncertain anyone is listening. Around the camp, fires have collapsed into gray embers. Ash drifts with the slightest movement, clinging to beards and lashes. Smoke lingers low, carrying the sour scent of last night's pottage, barley boiled until it burst, peas dull by age, a shred of salted pork divided so carefully it bordered on reverence. The smell has settled into everything, cloth, leather, breath. This is the hour between battles, when swords rest like sleeping animals, and the men who wield them are briefly allowed to forget what they are for. A soldier stirs, waking not because he is rested, but because the cold has found a new way inside him. He sits up slowly, joints protesting, and listens. No cries, no horns, only the soft chorus of 100 small sounds, coughing, murmured prayers, the scrape of iron as someone shifts in their mail. Horses stamp and snort at the edge of camp, their breath rising in pale clouds. The soldier rubs his hands together, feeling the cracks in his skin, the places where old scars meet new ones. He has learned that pain is not an alarm but a condition, like weather. Campaign life is not shaped by glory. It is shaped by waiting for orders that change before they are finished being spoken, waiting for food that arrives thin and late, waiting for a battle promised yesterday, delayed again today. The days stretch, unmarked by anything but routine. A man learns to fill them with small rituals that hold the mind together. He checks his gear as if it were a rosary. He runs fingers along the edge of his blade, not sharpening yet, only remembering its shape. He mends mail links with numb hands, twisting wire clothes again and again, patient as a monk copying letters he will never read. Leather must be rubbed with grease to keep rot at bay. Straps are tightened, loosened, tightened again. Belts lose holes as bodies shrink. Arrows are counted and counted again, and each time there seem to be fewer. No one remembers using them. No one admits taking them. Loss on campaign rarely has a witness. It simply accumulates like fatigue. Voices drift through the camp in fragments. Latin from a priest whose breath fogs the air as he blesses bread already gone stale. French from men-at-arms arguing over whose turn it is to stand watch. German curses muttered softly as a buckle refuses to sit right. English spoken in low tones, flattened by exhaustion. Language here is less about meaning than comfort. The sound of another human voice, even one complaining, is enough to remind a man he has not been left alone with his thoughts. Coins are rare. They pass from hand to hand reluctantly, edges worn smooth. Dice roll across shields laid flat on the ground, clattering like bones. A man loses a coin and laughs too loudly, as if daring the world to notice he still can. Another fingers a small wooden token carved with saint's likeness, the face worn nearly away by years of touch. Faith here is not loud. It does not announce itself. It lives in objects pressed close to body, in gestures repeated without thought. When the order finally comes to move, it does not feel like progress. The men rise with groans, gathering what little they spread out the night before. Fires are kicked apart, embers scattered so no glow remains. The camp erases itself quickly, leaving only flattened grass, darkened soil, and the smell of smoke that will linger long after they are gone. The column forms slowly, unevenly, as if reluctant to take shape. They march not toward battle, but away from it, away from the place where steel was expected to meet steel. The road winds through low fields and stands of trees already stripped bare by season or fear. Villages appear and disappear like thoughts one does not pursue. Doors hang open on broken hinges. A cart lies overturned, its wheel sunk deep into mud. A dog watches from a distance without barking, ribs visible beneath its coat. The men know these signs. They have learned to read absence as carefully as presence. No one speaks as they pass. Boots suck at the road. Cloaks brush against one another. The sound of marching is not thunderous here. It is a low, continuous drag, like something being pulled unwillingly across the land. A soldier keeps his eyes on the ground, watching for stones that might turn an ankle, for puddles that hide their depth. He has fallen before. He remembers the laughter, not cruel, just tired, and the way dignity must be gathered up afterward like dropped grain. They sleep in barns when they can, in abandoned houses when they must. Straw pricks through thin blankets. Lice fall like ash from beams overhead. Saints are painted on walls, their eyes darkened by smoke, their hands raised in gestures of blessing that feel distant and formal. The men lie beneath them anyway, as if proximity might matter. Someone always snores. Someone always prays. Someone always lies awake, staring at the dark, listening for sounds that do not come. Silence, when it arrives, is heavy. It presses in on the chest. It is a silence of waiting for something to break it. A branch snapping, a shout, a horn. Often, nothing happens, and that nothing becomes its own trial. Men begin to think too much in silence. They think of hands they will never hold again, of fields left unharvested, of words spoken hastily before leaving that now feel unfinished. The road remembers them even if no one else will. Ruts deepen under the weight of wagons. Grass is crushed and does not rise again. A soldier notices these marks without meaning to. He wonders how many armies have passed this way before, how many feet have pressed into the same earth, each convinced their march mattered more than the last. The thought does not comfort him, but it steadies him. To be one of many feels easier than to stand alone. As evening approaches, the light slants low and thin. Shadows stretch. The camp forms again, almost unconsciously. Fires are lit. The familiar choreography resumes. Someone produces a pot. Water is fetched from a stream, whose surface reflects the sky like dull metal. The meal is thin, but it is warm. Men eat slowly, savoring heat more than flavor. Steam rises from bowls and disappears into cold air. A soldier sits apart, not by choice but by habit. He fingers a rusted buckle tied to a strip of cracked leather. It once held his father's cloak. He cannot remember the man's face clearly anymore, only the sound of his voice and the weight of his hand on his shoulder. The buckle is useless now. It holds nothing. Still, he keeps it. Objects outlast certainty. Around him, talk drifts and fades. Plans are discussed without conviction. Rumors pass through the camp like drafts, unsettling but insubstantial. Someone claims battle is near. Someone else says the enemy has withdrawn. No one knows. The not knowing has become familiar enough to feel almost safe. As darkness settles, cloaks are drawn close. Helmets are placed within reach. Swords lie beside sleeping bodies, not polished, not gleaming, but ready. A priest moves quietly among the men, offering a blessing to those who ask, a nod to those who do not. The bell from earlier does not ring again. Night has its own authority. The soldier lies back, using his pack as a pillow. He watches sparks rise from the fire and vanish into blackness. He does not pray for victory. He has learned better than that. He prays instead for distance, for the battle to remain somewhere beyond the next hill for one more day. He prays for sleep that comes without dreams. He prays for the fragile mercy of this life between blood and blood, this narrow space where he is still allowed to be human. The earth receives his weight without complaint. The camp breathes around him. Somewhere an owl calls. Somewhere else, a man coughs and then falls silent again. The soldier closes his eyes, holding tightly to the knowledge that for now, at least, the swords remain still. Rain writes its own scripture across the road, turning dust to mud, making each step a negotiation between man and earth. The army moves slowly, almost reluctantly, as if the weight of history presses down upon every boot, every wagon wheel. Cloaks cling to bodies, soaked through, heavy with water, and where rubbing the skin raw in places no one notices until it burns. The smell of wet wool rises in waves, mingling with the tang of iron and the earthy perfume of churned soil. Somewhere ahead, banners sag, their colors dulled, saints and beasts stitched in careful thread now fading. their stories whispered only by the wind. A soldier's eyes fixed on the boots of the man before him. Counting each step as a talisman against the disorientation of endless miles, against the creeping monotony of the road. Counting keeps fear at bay. Counting keeps memory alive. On campaign, hunger is a quiet and persistent tyrant. Bread, when it comes, is hard as stone, its crust splitting in the mouth like splintering wood. It is meant to be soaked in broth, but broth often arrives thin, or lukewarm, or not at all. Cheese sweats in its rind. When meat is found, it is salted beyond kindness, stretched thin across so many mouths it could scarcely be called sustenance. Men eat with knives, with fingers numb from cold or fatigue, speaking little, saving breath for tomorrow's labor. There are rules in place: who eats first, who guards the wagons, who sleeps closest to horses. But rules bend when exhaustion outweighs obedience. A man's loyalty is tested most when he is pressed against the thin edge of survival, and even the strictest of captains cannot enforce desire for life itself. Nights arrive shrouded in damp and darkness. Men who slept standing now collapse on the hard earth, blankets and cloaks soaked through, bodies pressed close together for heat, a human shield against frost that bites mercilessly at fingers and toes. Fires struggle to burn, threatened by wind and water, and the smoke smells of wet wood and desperation. Those around the fire, faces blurred by dim light in a haze of wetness, share stories not of heroism but of small victories. How one man trapped a hare, how another found a patch of mushrooms that was not poisonous, how the priest managed to get the bread to rise slightly despite the damp. These stories are laughter's fragile shadow, the only reprieve from the suffocating rhythm of marching and waiting. Trust forms quietly between men on campaign. A soldier learns another's breathing in the night, the rhythm of coughs and murmured prayers, the way eyes flicker awake before the body moves. Scarred hands tell the story of past encounters. Each cut, each blister, each burn is a chapter of survival, not of glory. They share a wordless language. The tilt of the head, the slight touch on the shoulder, the way one hand lingers near a weapon but does not grasp it. They are strangers yet brothers, bound not by kinship but by necessity. Memory is their bridge, a shared recollection of home, of orchards and rivers, of firesides and the loom's rhythm. These memories hover, elusive as birds, sometimes landing on the shoulder of mine before taking flight again. Illness walks among them with the inevitability of nightfall. Fever, flux, cough, they're the unseen companions that march alongside every step. Names are spoken softly, as if uttering them too loudly would summon them closer. A comrade left behind at a monastery is a ghost before he even departs, carried in thought and whispered prayer. Payment is made in promises that dissolve under the weight of the next day's march. The road swallows him, just as it swallows discarded belongings and forgotten prayers, leaving behind only the memory of absence. The landscape itself becomes both adversary and witness. Forests murmur threats of ambush. Fields stretch empty and exposed. Roads are lined with simple crosses, some fresh, some gray with age, each marking a life reduced to a line and a name, sometimes only a mark. Children peer from hedgerows, wide-eyed, measuring these armed men against stories told by firelight, trying to reconcile the reality of war with myth. The soldiers avert their eyes, unsure which reflection they fear more, that of themselves or that of the observer. The land remembers their passage in subtle ways, the depression of ruts beneath wagon wheels, the flattened grass where many feet have passed, the broken branches marking haste or carelessness. Each trace is temporary, yet each shapes the memory of the campaign as indelibly as the scars on their skin. Food, when available, is prepared slowly, almost ceremoniously, though necessity renders elegance impossible. A pot hangs blackened over a reluctant fire, its contents stirred again and again, as if patience might render it more sustaining than it is. Men share spoons, share scraps, share guilt. Each bite carries the knowledge of its scarcity, the silent acknowledgement that to eat is to survive at the expense of the land, the livestock, perhaps even the people who were displaced to feed them. Confession comes in whispers around these shared meals, not through ritual but through the simple act of speaking, of acknowledging mistakes, fears, regrets. Laughter erupts sometimes, unbidden, a thin veil over the weight of responsibility, then retreats, embarrassed by its own brief brightness. Weapons are never far from reach, even when battle seems distant. A soldier sharpens a blade with rhythmic precision, listening to the whisper of steel against stone. The act is meditative, almost comforting, though he knows the blade may never taste blood. The sound itself is a tether to reality, a signal that even in this life of liminality, tools remain in place, ready for when necessity demands. Blades, worn leather, rope, and buckle, they all carry stories of survival, each object a silent witness to past victories, failures, and losses. Faith, for many, becomes an instrument of endurance more than devotion. Charms are pressed into tunics, relics kissed before crossings, prayers offered quietly or silently, a hope that even whispered words may sway fortune. Priests wander among the men, offering solace in Latin murmurs, their presence more ritual than certainty. Some listen, some ignore, yet all feel the presence, the thin tether to a world beyond the mud and exhaustion. Superstition blends with religion, a lifeline against the unpredictable cruelty of nature and men alike. The men move as shadows to the land, their presence marked more by what is absent than what is. Livestock is taken, trees broken for firewood, fields walked bare by marching feet. Guilt sits heavy, shared silently among them. A man will eat a stolen apple with gratitude and shame in equal measure, aware of the cost borne by another, somewhere unseen. Lessons in moral compromise are learned not in lectures, but in the quiet observation of survival. Every act of sustenance is balanced against the weight of conscience, the knowledge that tomorrow may demand further sacrifice, yet never offer redemption. Sleep is uneven and fleeting. The cold intrudes, settling into bones, and the soldier wakes to it repeatedly, counting breaths to remind himself he is still alive. Dreams blend with memory, forming visions of home, of faces loved and lost, of moments unremembered until recalled in fragments. Night becomes a theater of ghosts, shadows of the dead, echoes of those left behind, shapes of fear made corporeal by imagination. The firelight dances over faces, bringing life and warmth for a fleeting moment before darkness claims it again. Between battles, men are given the peculiar gift of time, but it is heavy with burden. They measure days by small details, the angle of the sun on a hill, the thickness of fog in a valley, the taste of water drawn from a particular stream. Each detail becomes a story, a mark of endurance, a chapter of existence that might otherwise be erased by the next march. A soldier memorizes these moments, recording them in a mind where no chronicler will reach, aware that memory itself may become his only weapon against erasure. By dawn, the rain has softened to a drizzle, and the landscape gleams with a wet sheen, reflective and indifferent. The army moves again, slow as morning, each step a ritual of persistence. Men speak less, and when they do, their words are murmurs of survival, fragment of thought not meant for the ears of others, but for the conscience of themselves. A twig snaps in the forest, and all heads turn instinctively, hearts synchronizing in silent anticipation of danger. But danger is not always present. Sometimes it is the expectation alone that tests the soul, the constant readiness that erodes the spirit more subtly than any blade. The road itself becomes a teacher. It presses into the soles of boots, shaping gait, shaping patience, shaping thought. The army's progress is measured not in miles, but in endurance, in the ability to bear discomfort and uncertainty without collapse. A man may curse it silently, may plead with it quietly, yet each step taken is both a surrender and a triumph, a testament to the quiet power of survival. The earth receives their passage with impassive dignity, indifferent to the suffering or perseverance of those who walk it. Evenings are rituals of quiet endurance. Fires are tended, meals shared, prayers whispered or ignored. Men gather around the firelight, sharing stories, hopes, and fears, fragments of lives that belong to other places, other times. Laughter surfaces and retreats, a delicate wave across the expanse of weariness. The priest moves quietly among them, blessing wounds, offering bread, whispering phrases whose meanings become as much habit as hope. All listen in some measure, even if only for the comfort of sound against the unbroken silence of uncertainty. As darkness deepens, the soldier finds a moment of stillness, hands clasped around a piece of leather or a small token, relic of home or faith, worn smooth by touch. Eyes close, if only briefly, allowing the rhythm of the camp, the low murmur of voices, the stamping of horses, the distant call of a night bird to lull him towards sleep. He does not pray for triumph or glory. He prays for continued distance from violence, for the fragile mercy of the suspended life, for the endurance to bear another day between battles, another day between the certainty of life and the inevitability of death. Somewhere in the night, bells toll, carried faintly on the wind, reminding men that the world continues, indifferent to their suffering or survival. The soldier listens, pressing himself closer to the earth, to warmth, to the fragile humanity that endures. Sleep comes at last, not complete, not free from the weight of memory, but sufficient to carry him toward the uncertain dawn that will arrive again, dripping rain over boots and banners, over men who march quietly, persistently, through the life that lies perpetually between battles. Morning in camp smells of ash and horses. Steam rises in pale tendrils from breath and dung alike, blurring the line between living bodies and the earth that bears them. The fire embers, gray and fractured, still hold memory of the night's flames, yet they offer little warmth against the chill that clings to the dawn. A horn sounds somewhere across the mist, not a call to battle, but a summons to gather, to count, to ensure that none have slipped into the shadows of sleep and been lost. Names are called, repeated into the fog. Some respond with murmurs. Others remain silent. Their absence is noted in the careful chalk marks of the quartermaster. Small, precise, mechanical, yet each mark is a quiet acknowledgment of mortality. Between battles, a soldier becomes both caretaker and witness. He tends his equipment with the same attention a monk gives to scripture. His kit is an altar, mail meticulously laid to dry, rings inspected for rust, a sword wedded to a dull sheen that promises readiness without pride. A letter, folded thinly to protect fragile ink, lies nearby, creases worn soft as cloth. The soldier handles it with reverence, imagining the hands of the person who wrote it, their scent carried faintly on the parchment. Even objects have stories. Even objects preserve the memory of a life outside this temporary, dangerous theater. The landscape presses close, indifferent to human endeavor. Forests whisper with the rustle of unseen creatures, branches scratching at cloaks and mail as if warning or mocking. Fields stretch empty, exposed to sky and wind, each inch measured not by miles, but by the weight of a footstep pressing mud and grass into memory. Roads are lined with crosses, some freshly carved, some weathered gray, each marking a life reduced to a simple shape, a name, a prayer. Children peek from hedges, wide-eyed and silent, measuring the armored men against stories told by firelight. The soldiers avert their gaze, aware of how easily fear can inhabit those they look upon as observers and innocents alike. Food is a ritual, never a luxury. A blackened pot hangs over a reluctant flame, its contents stirred with careful repetition. Barley, scalded and softened, smells faintly of ash. Roots and occasional scraps of salted meat lend texture and bitter comfort. Men share spoons with an unspoken etiquette, careful not to spill or insult. Hunger sharpens not just the body but conscience. Each bite is measured, each morsel appreciated, each scrap of flavor carrying guilt, even when there is no one to witness it. Confessions rise naturally here, not as words of a priest, but as murmured thoughts between comrades. They speak of mistakes made in silence, of fears born long ago, of guilt too heavy for daylight. Laughter comes in fragile bursts, brief and startling, then retreats under the oppressive weight of reality. Weapons are extensions of life itself. A sword worn and nicked is not a symbol of honor in these hours. It is a survival promise. A soldier sharpens his blade with a quiet diligence, stone against steel sounding a rhythm both comforting and demanding. Metal and stone, edge and touch, create a pattern, a ritual that distracts the mind from counting hours or days. Blades may never taste blood in this interlude, yet their presence demands respect. The same applies to leather straps, buckles, ropes, and chainmail, all silent witnesses to the campaign's unrecorded history. Faith exists as a practical shield. Charms press into tunics, tokens kissed before stream crossings, prayers offered in whispered Latin or the quiet language of hope. Priests move among the men, blessing wounds, encouraging fealty, reminding the army of distant hierarchies and divine oversight. Some listen, others ignore, yet each is subtly comforted by the presence of ritual, by the weight of tradition binding them to a past not yet fully vanished, and a future that might never arrive. Superstition and religion intertwine, becoming a faint melody that guides a mind through monotony and danger alike. Between battles, the body becomes a library of stories, each ache, each blister, each lingering wound a chapter. Old injuries speak in sharp whispers, new ones demand attention. Fingers blister from rains, knees bruise from riding in mud, backs stiffen from sleeping on straw. It is a catalog of suffering and endurance. A man learns to read these signals, understanding which aches require treatment, which must be endured, which tell the story of human resilience in a landscape that neither acknowledges nor forgives weakness. The men sleep in barns, empty houses, and open fields when no shelter is found. Straw pricks through cloaks and blankets, lice fall from the rafters like ash, and the scent of wet hay mixes with human sweat. Saints are painted on the beams, their faces dulled by smoke and damp, eyes fixed eternally upon silent witnesses below. Men rest beneath them, even as fatigue keeps consciousness tethered loosely to the body. Someone always snores. Someone always murmurs a prayer. Someone else listens, counting heartbeats, steps, or breaths to measure the passage of time that does not belong to them. Illness stalks silently. Fever, flux, cough, they are constant companions, unannounced and uninvited. Names are whispered softly, as though loudness would invite them closer. A comrade left at a monastery, entrusted to the mercy of strangers and God, becomes a phantom within the minds of the men who march on. They carry him in thought, in prayer, in silent remembrance. The road swallows absence as easily as presence, and all are made aware that survival is as fragile as life itself. The march is both cruel and meditative. Each step presses the body into the earth, each stride a negotiation with fatigue, mud, and the relentless rhythm of the world. Men learn the language of quiet. The tilt of the head, the soft exhale before a cough, the pause before lifting a boot from mud. A glance across the line of soldiers conveys more than words ever could. The march becomes a meditation, a constant exercise in endurance and attention, where every small detail, the angle of sunbeam, the depth of a puddle, the distant sound of bells, acquires significance beyond itself. In the evening, fires are rekindled, though they struggle against dampness and wind. Smoke curls upward, carry with it the scent of ash and sustenance, mingling with the aroma of human flesh and leather. Men gather, sharing stories, gossip, fragments of memory from home and previous campaigns. Confessions arise, often whispered, of errors committed, fears indulged, and regrets too heavy for daylight. The firelight paints their faces, transforming them briefly into saints or specters, ephemeral in the dim glow before darkness consumes them again. The night offers no comfort. Sleep is shallow, punctuated by the cold that creeps into bones, by dreams of fields untraveled and faces long forgotten, by the persistent awareness that danger may come without warning. Shadows play tricks, and every noise, a twig snapping, the movement of a horse, a distant cry, becomes a test of vigilance. The soldiers have learned that anticipation can be more exhausting than the threat itself, that fear, when constant, becomes another companion to bear. Memories surface in these hours. An orchard at home, the feel of a mother's hand, the weight of a father's grip, a sister's laughter echoing across hallways now abandoned. These recollections hover, sometimes bringing warmth, often sorrow. They are fleeting birds that land briefly, reminding men of the lives they once knew, the lives they might reclaim, or the lives they will never see again. Each memory is a tether, fragile and delicate, against the relentless sweep of the campaign. By dawn, the mist rises, cloaking the army once more. The road glistens with water, reflecting gray skies and dull mirrors. Men adjust cloaks, tighten straps, prepare boots. The landscape, indifferent and eternal, watches them pass. Forests whisper. Fields lie silent. Crosses and markers trace the memory of those who have gone before, bearing witness to blood, sweat, and quiet endurance. The march resume is slow, deliberate, almost mournful, each step a repetition, each movement a testament to survival. Even in the midst of monotony, beauty intrudes unexpectedly. The sun breaks briefly through clouds, illuminating a dewdrop hanging from a blade of grass, a bird perched on a distant branch, a village smoke rising gently in the distance. These small fragments of life carry an almost painful poignancy, reminders of what the world holds beyond war, beyond fear, beyond loss. A soldier's eyes linger, drinking in these moments, knowing their ephemerality, aware that memory may be their only refuge. Object becomes sacred. A rusted buckle, a bent arrow, a fragment of a torn cloak, each carrying a story, each preserving connection to a past untouched by battle. The soldier touches them carefully, tracing worn edges, feeling the weight of history and human endurance in his palms. Even the most mundane artifact becomes a vessel of memory, a talisman against the passage of time, against forgetting. As evening falls, fires are lit, and the cycle begins anew. The priest moves among the men, his words blending with the murmurs of the weary and the silence of the indifferent night. The soldiers listen, each in his own way, receiving comfort or merely acknowledging the familiar cadence. Weapons are tended, clothes dried as best they can, and the men settle weary into whatever semblance of rest is available. The camp breathes as one, a collective rhythm of life between battles. The soldier lies on damp straw, feeling the cold seep through boots and cloak, listening to the murmur of companions, the stamping of horses, the distant call of an owl. He does not pray for victory or glory. He prays for the simple continuance of existence, for a day more between battles, for the fragile mercy of routine and survival. His eyes close, and sleep, shallow and fitful, carries him away, cradled by exhaustion and the quiet rhythm of camp life. Somewhere far away, a bell tolls. Its voice is faint, but it reaches him, a reminder that the world endures, indifferent yet present. And in this suspended moment between fear and hope, life and death, the soldier rests, bound to the earth, bound to memory, bound to the fragile thread of survival. The camp wakes to frost biting at exposed skin. Cloaks crackle like dry leaves when shaken, stiff as boards from a night's cold. Fingers ache before they even move. A soldier curses softly in a tongue learned far from this place, a muttered charm against discomfort that might also be a prayer. Fire must be coaxed back to life. Sparks nurse like infants until flame finally rises, licking at wet wood and frozen straw. The warmth is fragile, fleeting, yet it draws men close, faces glowing in the tentative light, eyes hollowed by sleep stolen in pieces. Some hands tremble not from cold alone, but from the accumulated strain of months spent between battles. On campaign, time loses its clean edges. Days blend into one another, not marked by calendars or the sun alone, but by weather, by rations, by the shouted orders of captains and the whispered corrections of veterans. The soldier learns obedience as endurance rather than belief, following instructions not for honor, but to maintain rhythm, to maintain life. He stands watch while others sleep, counting stars through veils of cloud, listening for sounds that might be wind or might be death. Each night is a meditation, each moment of quiet a test of patience and resolve. The weight of his helm presses on thoughts, grounding them into a dull acceptance that suffering is continuous, and courage is the ability to endure it. They pass through lands ruled by unfamiliar laws. Tolls are demanded, coins argued over, oaths sworn with fingers raised, hearts pounding beneath tunics. Justice is swift and uneven. A thief is whipped on the town square. A deserter is hanged from a tree whose branches will later shelter birds that care nothing for the sins of men. The rope remains long after the body is cut down, creaking gently in the wind, a symbol that discipline can be as permanent as the earth itself, leaving memory in motion where flesh is gone. A soldier learns that authority is both arbitrary and absolute, and that survival depends as much on obedience as it does on skill. Yet moments of beauty intrude uninvited. Sunlight filters through frost-laden branches, illuminating tiny diamonds on leaves and icicles, fragile against the sharp winter air. A woman sings from a distant field, her voice pure and unbound, carrying across the distance to men who have not heard music except in memory. The smell of baking bread drifts from a village not yet touched by war, the yeast swollen and fragrant, lifting spirits quietly. These moments hurt more than hardship, for they remind the soldiers of what waits beyond the horizon, unreachable for now. They are reminders of homes they cannot return to, of love and comfort that have become abstract, almost forbidden luxuries. The soldier learns to attend to small miracles. He notices the frost patterns on his cloak, the way steam rises from water in his cupped hands, the shiver of a horse beneath him, ears twitching. Each observation anchors him to the living world, however harsh it may be. Nature itself becomes a companion, indifferent, yet reliable, offering signs and cycles in a way humans cannot. Even the mud, the frost, and the relentless wind are teachers, showing the limits of the body and the power of persistence. Meals are prepared with painstaking care, though scarcity dictates them. Porridge is stirred with patience, vegetables chopped with care, meat sliced in and distributed sparingly. Men eat slowly, appreciating warmth and sustenance as much as flavor, aware of scarcity and cost. Each mouthful is an acknowledgement of the delicate balance between life and hunger, survival and morality. Confessions rise during these meals. Stories of past errors, regrets too heavy for daytime, small betrayals and unnoticed kindnesses. Laughter erupts occasionally, a fragile and ephemeral counterpoint to the relentless cadence of toil and march, then fades, embarrassed by its own existence. Illness stalks silently, more reliable than any enemy. Fever, cough, dysentery, companions unwelcome yet persistent. Names of the sick are spoken softly, and prayers or charms are offered, but not always with belief. The soldier knows that some will recover, some will not, and that death is a quiet, ever-present companion. A comrade left behind in a monastery or infirmary becomes a phantom in memory, a reminder that the road does not stop for grief, that survival carries with it guilt, as much as it carries breath. Sleep, when it comes, is brief and punctuated by discomfort. Straw pricks through blankets, frost creeps in through boots, and the wind finds gaps in cloaks to chill exposed skin. Men lie shoulder to shoulder for warmth, listening to one another's breath, counting it as if it were a rhythm of life itself. Dreams intrude, sometimes of home, sometimes of battles past, sometimes of faces lost of memory or misfortune. Waking and dreaming blur in these conditions, and the soldier learns that the mind itself can be a battlefield, as treacherous as any foe with sword in hand. Objects become talismans. A rusted buckle pressed to the chest, a piece of rope knotted carefully, a sword nicked and worn. Each carries memory and protection. A letter, folded carefully, is handled as if it might dissolve if touched too roughly. Even worn boots tell a story. Miles traveled, mud and water pressed into leather, soles stitched and patched by patient hands. Care for these objects becomes an act of preservation, both of self and of humanity. The soldier recognizes that in their absence he might also be lost, reduced to shadow emotion and instinct alone. The camp forms as night approaches. Fires are rekindled despite damp wood, flames dancing and flickering, casting fleeting shadows on cloaked figures. The smell of smoke, mixed with the faint aroma of late-cooked meals, creates a fragile cocoon of comfort. Soldiers gather, sharing scraps of warmth and fragments of conversation. Confessions surface, small errors, fears, regrets, and hopes too faint to be trusted. The firelight illuminates faces etched with fatigue, age, and endurance, turning men briefly into saints, specters, or mythic figures of endurance. The rhythm of murmured speech, occasional laughter, and crackling will become a lullaby against the night's pervasive chill. The weight of anticipation presses silently against each man. Tomorrow might bring skirmish or siege, or it might bring only more hours of waiting, more miles of frozen road. The soldier sharpens his sword, not in expectation of use, but as a ritual of calm, a rhythm that orders a mind when chaos is only potential. The steel sings softly against the whetstone, a sound almost sacred, echoing in the chest as heartbeat and meditation. He counts strokes, and in them counts his life, his choices, his endurance. Evening prayers begin, sometimes whispered, sometimes ignored, carried along by the wind. The sound of bells from distant towns or monasteries travels thinly, almost lost in the vastness of night, yet arrives, a reminder that the world beyond this camp persists. Hands cross over chests, murmured words form and fade, gestures of hope or habit, of devotion or necessity. The soldier traces the sign of the cross, not out of piety alone, but muscle memory of hope, a tether to continuity in a world marked by impermanence. As night settles fully, cloaks are drawn closer, helmets placed within reach, Swords and daggers lay beside sleeping bodies. The camp breathes as one, a collective rhythm of life suspended between acts of violence. The soldier lies back on damp straw, listening to the soft sounds. Horses shifting, a distant cough. The creak of a wagon wheel left at rest, the occasional bird settling for night. He does not pray for battle to end, nor for glory to be won. He prays only for endurance, for survival, for another night held together by routine, by ritual, by the fragile grace of small mercies. He closes his eyes, letting the flicker of firelight and the rhythm of breathing around him carry him into fitful sleep. Dreams come as fragments. A bell ringing without hands, a door that will not open, fields blanketed with frost and silence. The line between waking and dreaming blurs. The frost outside and the warmth of the body create a tension he learns to navigate with practice. Somewhere far away, the wind carries the tolling of a bell, a reminder that time moves, indifferent to suffering, indifferent to survival, yet persistent and eternal. The soldier understands, in these moments, that campaign life is not defined by glory or loss alone, but by endurance in the ordinary. Every step, every meal, every breath is both labor and prayer, a testimony to resilience. Between battles, the true struggle lies in maintaining humanity, in keeping memory and attention alive, in tending to objects, companions, and self with care that borders on reverence. Fingers press into the cold earth as he lies on straw, grounding him, reminding him that he still exists, still breathes, still endures. The frost glints on his cloak, a mirror to distant stars, themselves witnesses to countless marches like this one. Somewhere a horse shifts in size. Somewhere a man murmurs a prayer. Somewhere the wind whistles over the distant hills. Indifferent yet attentive, the soldier closes his eyes fully, and for a brief span, suspended between fear and hope, cold and warmth, life and death, he rests. Here, in this frozen, sacred interlude, he finds the fragile mercy of existence, of a life lived quietly between storms, and allows it to carry him toward dawn. Silence is never empty on campaign. It hums with anticipation, carrying the weight of footsteps and the creak of leather, the faint whisper of metal brushing against itself. The army halts near a river whose waters move steadily, unconcerned by the banners, the armor, or the men whose lives feel perched precariously upon its banks. Helmets are removed, hair matted with sweat and mud, faces washed or half-cleaned, revealing youth beneath grime and age beneath wear. The river reflects everything and nothing, a mirror to human toil, indifferent to the scars and stories pressed against its current. It carries away blood from scraped knuckles, from cuts earned without ceremony, and yet it remains untainted by guilt. Between battles, faith becomes practical rather than ceremonial. Charms press into tunics, small tokens kissed before stream crossings, prayers offered quietly to saints whose names have been memorized but whose stories feel distant, are the currency of hope. The soldier may not know his letters, but he knows the way to charm against his chest when fear tightens, the comfort it brings even when logic offers none. Priests move among the men, their steps soft and deliberate, murmuring words shaped both by doctrine and exhaustion. Not all men listen, but all notice. Faith becomes a silent companion, sometimes a comfort, sometimes a reminder of fragility, a steady hand guiding hearts toward endurance. Supplies arrive late, often insufficient, and foraging parties must brave woods and fields to retrieve what they can. Apples, onions, and roots are welcomed almost as treasures, while livestock taken for food carries the weight of unspoken guilt. Villagers plead, barter, and disappear into shadows, leaving only traces of their lives and broken fences, overturned carts, and hurried footprints. The soldier eats knowing the cost, chewing slowly, eyes lowered to ground, tasting not only sustenance but responsibility. Each bite is a meditation on survival, each swallow a negotiation with conscience. Hunger teaches humility, endurance, and a delicate balance between necessity and morality. At night, stories surface in the half-light of campfires, not tales of heroism or conquest, but confessions of mistakes, a wrong turn taken, a blade raised too soon, a face remembered too clearly. These narratives soften the air, creating a fragile intimacy among men who otherwise speak in grunts and commands. The firelight glances off dented helms and worn mail, illuminating faces etched with fatigue, worry, and survival. Shadows stretch long across the frozen earth, mingling with the smoke rising into the night, casting each man as both witness and participant in the living tableau of endurance. Illness walks among the army with the same inevitability as the march. Fever, flux, and cough pass silently, touching some and sparing others. Names of the sick are whispered, remedies offered in quiet corners of tents or under the branches of trees. Not every life can be saved, and some are left behind at monasteries or makeshift infirmaries, entrusted to strangers and the mercy of God. The soldier carries these absences in his mind, a constant companion, reminding him of the fragility of existence, the thin line between life and loss, the weight of choices made in the name of survival. Weapons are not just tools. They are extensions of identity and survival. A sword, nicked and dulled by countless marches, is handled with care. Leather straps, buckles, and chain mail are tended meticulously, each repair a quiet ritual. The soldier sharpens his blade even when no battle is near, stone against steel creating a rhythm that centers the mind. The sound of whetstone against metal becomes a meditative cadence, a heartbeat of readiness, a prayer for endurance. The act itself is reassurance, a small anchor in the unpredictable storm of campaign life. The landscape itself seems to observe, pressing against a column in subtle ways. Forests whisper warnings. Fields open vulnerabilities. Rivers demand careful crossings. Roads lined with crosses mark the lives of those who have fallen before, a quiet reminder of mortality. Children peek from hedgerows, observing the soldiers with wide eyes, measuring them against tales told by firelight. The soldiers avert their gaze, knowing that every glance carries potential to haunt or console, to inspire fear or to offer unspoken acknowledgement. Even in the midst of monotony, beauty persists. Sunlight glimmers on wet leaves, dew-laden grass sparkles in the early hour. A bird's song pierces the silence, a thin thread of life weaving through the gray expanse of earth and water. These moments hurt almost as much as hardship, for they are reminders of worlds beyond the march, of homes and hearts abandoned, of love left waiting. The soldier notices these fragments with care, knowing they may be his only sustenance of mind, the only comfort for the heart until such pleasures might be reached again or never. Sleep arrives reluctantly, patchy and brief. Men lie shoulder to shoulder on cold earth or straw, wrapped in cloaks stiffened by moisture. Dreams intrude, blending memory with fear, sometimes bringing glimpses of home, sometimes the specter of battle. Waking and dreaming merge. Time loses authority, and the mind navigates its own terrain, negotiating past and present, safety and danger, memory and anticipation. Even in rest, the soldier remains alert to the rhythm of camp. A cough, a shuffling foot, the creak of leather, the snort of a horse. Each sound carries meaning, each motion a subtle signal of life's persistence. Objects become sacred in their quiet presence. A rusted buckle, a worn strap, a fragment of a torn cloak, even a shard of pottery picked from the road. All are handled with care. Each carries the weight of memory, survival, and continuity. Letters folded carefully, notes pressed into tunics. Tokens of faith and home are touched reverently. The soldier knows that in these small objects lie not just utility, but reminders of humanity preserved amidst hardship, reminders that even in adversity, life and memory endure. The rhythm of march, meal, watch, and rest structures life in its absence of other measures. Each day is a repetition of the last, yet each repetition carries nuance. The feel of frost under boots, the weight of a pack, the stretch of sore muscles, the cadence of comrades' footsteps beside him. The soldier becomes attuned to these subtle changes. Reading the landscape in the camp is a language in itself. Every observation, every gesture, every sound becomes a story, a marker of survival, a testament to endurance. As night falls, the camp is a fragile constellation of light and shadow. Fires burn low, casting warm glows on the mud and straw. Soldiers huddle close, sharing warmth, conversation, and occasionally quiet laughter. The priest moves among them, murmuring blessings and words of guidance, his presence a comfort even to those who do not believe. The sound of bell, wind, and distant water creates a symphony of existence, an ever-present reminder of both vulnerability and resilience. The soldier sharpens his sword one last time before sleep, feeling the smooth curve of the blade, the reassuring weight in his hand. Steel against stone is rhythm, is meditation, is prayer. He pauses, listening to the river, to the low murmur of companions, to the distant tolling of bells carried faintly on the wind. The river carries away remnants of life, blood, waste, and sorrow, yet it remains indifferent, a silent witness to the endurance of men. He breathes in rhythm with the camp, attuning himself to the pulse of collective survival. In this quiet interval between battles, he understands the truth of the campaign. It is not measured by victory or defeat alone, but by endurance, by attention, by small acts of care and ritual. Every step, every meal, every whispered prayer or confession, every maintenance of gear or tending of animals is an assertion of humanity in the face of relentless hardship. The soldier lies down on cold straw, fingers pressed into the earth for steadiness, aware of the fragility of life, of memory, of hope. The night is long. Frost glints on cloaks and blades. Stars will silently above, indifferent yet eternal witnesses. Horses shift. Humans murmur. Wind sighs through trees. Somewhere a bell tolls, carried by the wind across hills and valleys, a distant marker of time, faith, and continuity. Sleep comes gradually, fitful and shallow, yet enough to sustain life for one more day. The soldier allows himself this rest, this fragile suspension of consciousness, knowing that dawn will bring frost, mud, march, and a faint comfort of order amidst chaos. And in this suspended interval, between vigilance and slumber, between fear and endurance, life persists. The soldier, wrapped in cloak and doubt, embraces the fragile mercy of being alive in the quiet, unrecorded hours, in the spaces between battles, where survival itself becomes an act of faith, a testament to persistence, and an affirmation of the enduring human spirit. Dawn breaks slowly, not with fanfare, but with the quiet insistence of frost glinting on tents and cloaks. Each breath rises in pale clouds, mingling with the smoke of half-extinguished fires from the night before. Soldiers stir, bodies stiff with cold and wear, boots cracking with frozen mud. Cloaks cling to shoulders, mail lies heavy on torsos, and hands, raw and cracked, adjust belts, tighten straps, and examine weapons with care. Nothing is hurried. Even the urgency of movement is tempered by the weight of exhaustion, by the fragile understanding that each day survived is a small triumph against the relentless march of fatigue, hunger, and exposure. The road winds through low hills and forests stripped bare by season or neglect. Puddles reflect gray skies, roads slick with mud and ice. Every step demands attention, for a misstep may twist an ankle, a fallen pack may crush fingers, and the quiet rustle of the forest may signal neither bird nor wind, but unseen danger. The soldier keeps his eyes trained on the earth, noting the subtle rise and fall of the ground, the dark stains of animal tracks, the debris of previous travelers. Observation is survival. Awareness is discipline. Awareness is endurance. Between battles, time stretches and contracts, measured not by hours, but by the rhythm of tasks and the subtle changes in the body. The soldier wakes with aches, rubs frozen hands together, examines blisters and bruises earned from miles and exertion. Clothing is adjusted carefully. Cloaks dried as best possible over fires, boots greased and stitched, mail links examined for weak spots. Small rituals occupy the mind, offering structure and continuity in an otherwise shifting world. Each action, however mundane, carries weight. To maintain gear is to maintain life. Meals are thin and humble, yet preparation is deliberate. Porridge boils in blackened pots, thickened by barley, flavored sparingly with roots or the occasional salted meat. Men eat slowly, acknowledging both scarcity and sustenance. Conversation is muted, the murmured exchanges of experience, of fear, of memory. Stories of home surface, of family, of hearths and firesides, as if the act of speaking might momentarily conjure warmth. Some laughter erupts, brief and fragile, then fades, swallowed by the cold and the rhythm of marching. Each meal becomes a meditation on endurance. Nourishment is not simply food, but ritual, memory, and affirmation of life. Faith is ever-present, subtle, interwoven into objects and gestures. A charm pressed into a tunic, a coin blessed by a priest, a token kiss before crossing a stream. All serve as anchors against the uncertainty that shadows the campaign. Priests move among men with careful steps, murmuring blessings, offering small comforts, their voices low yet resonant, a bridge between the physical demands of the campaign and the spiritual endurance of its participants. Some men follow devoutly, some quietly, some ignore, but all are influenced. Faith is as practical as it is aspirational. It is comfort, ritual, and a means to endure the unending hours of waiting and walking. Illness is a constant, invisible companion. Fever, flux, cough, and dysentery pass silently through the ranks. Names are whispered for those afflicted, remedies offered where possible. Some are left behind at infirmaries, entrusted to strangers and prayer. Others recover or suffer quietly, bearing weakness as an invisible mark. The soldier observes, absorbs, and internalizes these realities. Each sickness is a reminder of mortality, of the fragile thread upon which life balances, and the weight of survival becomes tangible, pressing into every decision, every step, every act of care. The march continues. Soldiers move in rhythm, boots squelching in mud, cloaks brushing against one another. Horses snort, wagons creak, and the occasional shout carries faintly across the landscape. The land itself is an adversary and a teacher. Forests offer cover in danger, fields stretch exposed, rivers demand careful crossing. Crosses and markers along the road tell stories of those who fell before. Anonymous, named, remembered, or forgotten. The soldier observes, notes, and internalizes. Memory is survival. Awareness is survival. Faith and observation intertwine with the physical act of movement. Evenings bring fragile rituals of comfort. Fires are coaxed into life, smoke curling in gentle spirals, carrying the smell of wet wood, earth, and food. Men huddle near warmth, sharing small stories of home, of victories minor and major, of fears whispered to no one and no one else. Confessions emerge, not to a priest, but to the fire itself, to the presence of companions, to the acceptance of vulnerability in quiet communion. The firelight dances over mail, leather, and faces, illuminating both fatigue and endurance, creating ephemeral portraits of humanity in the midst of hardship. Weapons are never far. The sword, worn and nicked, is handled with care. Stone and steel create a meditative rhythm, a tactile and auditory anchor. Blades are sharpened, mail is inspected, straps and buckles adjusted. Each act is a ritual, a claim to agency amidst circumstances of limited control. Preparedness is both defense and assurance. Even without immediate threat, the act of tending to weaponry sustains morale and sanity, connecting the soldier to purpose beyond mere survival. The night brings a cold clarity. Frost clings to cloaks and hair, silvering the camp under moonlight. Stars will silently above, indifferent yet constant. Horses shift and sigh. Soldiers murmur or lie in tense sleep, listening to the subtle symphony of life between battles. The creak of leather, the hum of insects, the distant call of birds. The soldier lies, body pressed against straw, hands resting against the earth, fingers tracing patterns in frost or soil. These tactile connections remind him of presence, of life, of endurance. Dreams are patchwork, merging memory, fear, hope, and longing. The soldier sees home. Fires crackling in the hearth, faces of loved ones, familiar landscapes now distant. He sees battle, fleeting images of steel, blood, mud, and shouted commands. Sleep and consciousness mingle, a liminal state where past and present overlap. He awakens repeatedly, body stiff, senses alert, yet comforted by the knowledge that his companions share the same vulnerability, the same rhythm, the same fragile endurance. Objects become sacred. Rusted buckles, worn straps, fragments of cloth, letters folded and pressed, tokens of faith or memory. Each is touched with care. They hold stories, anchor memory, and provide quiet comfort. The soldier handles these artifacts not simply for function, but for continuity, preservation, and a sense of connection beyond the immediate hardships of the campaign. Every item carries its own weight, its own testimony to human persistence. Through the long night, the soldier contemplates the delicate balance between vigilance and rest, between endurance and surrender. Each moment between battles is a lesson in patience and resilience. Every step, every meal, every whispered prayer or confession, every small act of care for oneself or for others is a thread in the tapestry of survival. The ordinary acts, preparing food, tending gear, adjusting cloaks, observing the world, become sacred in their repetition, affirming life when glory or recognition is absent. By dawn, frost glimmers once more and the column moves again. The river reflects pale skies, mist rising like smoke, carrying away the residue of past toil, while leaving no mark of mercy or disdain. Soldiers adjust boots, straps, and cloaks. Horses shake their coats, wagons creak, banners sway. The land watches silently, indifferent yet witness. Each step forward is both survival and assertion. Every mile a small triumph over fatigue, cold, and monotony. In this quiet interval, the soldier understands the essence of campaign life. It is not the battle alone that defines him, but the endurance, the attention, the small rituals, and the preservation of memory and humanity amidst hardship. Between acts of violence, between marches, between uncertainty and vigilance, survival itself becomes a sacred, deliberate, and meditative practice. He rests finally on straw, frost glinting faintly on his cloak, listening to the low rhythm of the camp. Murmurs, shifting horses, distant water, the faint tolling of a bell. Sleep comes in fragile increments, not complete, but enough to sustain life for another day. In this suspended state between fear and hope, cold and warmth, presence and memory, he finds a fragile mercy of life itself. A life carried between battles, preserved in ritual, memory, and quiet endurance, where the mere act of being alive is a testament to resilience, faith, and humanity. Mist drapes the valley like a ghostly veil, curling around wagons, horses, and the trudging figures of soldiers whose faces are pale and streaked with grime. Each step presses into mud, sucking boots downward, leaving fleeting impressions that vanish almost as soon as they are made. The cold is sharp against exposed skin, a reminder of mortality as keen as any sword. Cloaks cling to bodies, sodden with rain or sweat, and the scent of wet leather and horses mingles with the earthy aroma of churned soil. Somewhere ahead, the sound of bells rings faintly from a distant monastery, carrying both warning and solace, a signal that life continues outside the rigid cadence of war. Between battles, the soldiers occupy themselves in small, deliberate routines. A man tends to his sword, the whetstone singing softly against steel, creating a rhythm that soothes and grounds the mind. Another mends a ripped cloak, threading wool with careful fingers, aware that each stitch is both protection and survival. Meals are modest and hurried, barley, salted meat, the occasional root, but they are infused with ritual. Sharing a morsel is as much about connection as sustenance. Conversation is sparse, fragmented, yet heavy with the unspoken. Memories of home, fears of the next encounter, and the silent acknowledgement of companions lost along the way. Illness, fatigue, and injury stalk the camp like shadows. Coughs echo through tents and under trees, fevered hands clutching at blankets, faces pale under the weight of exhaustion. Men left behind at monasteries or infirmaries become phantoms in the memories of those who march onward, their absence a constant whisper, reminding the living of the thin line between endurance and mortality. As night falls, fires flicker dimly, casting long shadows across the frozen earth. Soldiers huddle close, exchanging murmured words, fleeting laughter or simple silence. The stars wheel overhead, indifferent yet eternal, witnesses to suffering and resilience alike. In this suspended moment between vigilance and rest, cold and warmth, fear and hope, the soldier finds a fragile rhythm, the act of enduring, of maintaining gear, tending companions, and surviving another day becomes a sacred practice. Between battles, life itself is both struggle and testament, a quiet assertion of humanity amidst the indifferent sweep of the world. The soldier observes, notes, and internalizes. Memory is survival. Awareness is survival. Faith and observation intertwine with the physical act of movement. Evenings bring fragile rituals of comfort. Fires are coaxed into life, smoke curling in gentle spirals, carrying the smell of wet wood, earth, and food. Men huddle near warmth, sharing small stories of home, of victories minor and major, of fears whispered to no one and no one else. Confessions emerge, not to a priest, but to the fire itself, to the presence of companions, to the acceptance of vulnerability in quiet communion. The firelight dances over mail, leather, and faces, illuminating both fatigue and endurance, creating ephemeral portraits of humanity in the midst of hardship. Weapons are never far. The sword, worn and nicked, is handled with care. Stone and steel create a meditative rhythm, a tactile and auditory anchor. Blades are sharpened, mail is inspected, straps and buckles adjusted. Each act is a ritual, a claim to agency amidst circumstances of limited control. Preparedness is both defense and assurance. Even without immediate threat, the act of tending to weaponry sustains morale and sanity, connecting the soldier to purpose beyond mere survival. The night brings a cold clarity. Frost clings to cloaks and hair, silvering the camp under moonlight. Stars will silently above, indifferent yet constant. Horses shift and sigh. Soldiers murmur or lie in tense sleep, listening to the subtle symphony of life between battles. The creak of leather, the hum of insects, the distant call of birds. The soldier lies, body pressed against straw, hands resting against the earth, fingers tracing patterns in frost or soil. These tactile connections remind him of presence, of life, of endurance. Dreams are patchwork, merging memory, fear, hope, and longing. The soldier sees home. Fires crackling on the hearth, faces of loved ones, familiar landscapes now distant. He sees battle, fleeting images of steel, blood, mud, and shouted commands. Sleep and consciousness mingle, a liminal state where past and present overlap. He awakens repeatedly, body stiff, senses alert, yet comforted by the knowledge that his companions share the same vulnerability, the same rhythm, the same fragile endurance. Objects become sacred. Rusted buckles, worn straps, fragments of cloth, letters folded and pressed, tokens of faith or memory. Each is touched with care. They hold stories, anchor memory, and provide quiet comfort. The soldier handles these artifacts not simply for function, but for continuity, preservation, and a sense of connection beyond the immediate hardships of the campaign. Every item carries its own weight, its own testimony to human persistence. Through the long night, the soldier contemplates the delicate balance between vigilance and rest, between endurance and surrender. Each moment between battles is a lesson in patience and resilience. Every step, every meal, every whispered prayer or confession, every small act of care for oneself or for others is a thread in the tapestry of survival. The ordinary acts, preparing food, tending gear, adjusting cloaks, observing the world, become sacred in their repetition, affirming life when glory or recognition is absent. By dawn, frost glimmers once more, and the column moves again. The river reflects pale skies, mist rising like smoke, carrying away the residue of past toil, while leaving no mark of mercy or disdain. Soldiers adjust boots, straps, and cloaks. Horses shake their coats, wagons creak, banners sway. The land watches silently, indifferent yet witness. Each step forward is both survival and assertion. Every mile a small triumph over fatigue, cold, and monotony. In this quiet interval, the soldier understands the essence of campaign life. It is not the battle alone that defines him, but the endurance, the attention, the small rituals, and the preservation of memory and humanity amidst hardship. Between acts of violence, between marches, between uncertainty and vigilance, survival itself becomes a sacred, deliberate, and meditative practice.